Hello, my dear friends. How are you? I hope you all doing very well. And today I would like to ask you something. Tell me, have you ever wondered how giant companies protect themselves from rising interest rates, changing currency values, or sudden increases in oil prices? And did you know that many companies actually exchange financial risks with each other? Yes, you heard it right. And that exchange is called a swap. Swaps are among the most powerful financial derivatives used by banks, multinational companies, and even governments worldwide. But most beginners find swaps confusing, right? Let's understand this. A swap simply means an exchange. In finance, two parties agree to exchange financial payments or financial risks for a certain period of time. That's the entire core concept. Simple. Let's suppose you love chocolate ice cream and your friend love vanilla. But by mistake both of you bought the wrong flavor. So what do? You exchange, right? You swap. Both become happy. Similarly in finance, companies exchange financial obligations according to what benefits them. But why do companies use swaps? Because markets consistently change. Interest rate change, currency values change, oil prices change, raw material prices change, and these changes can create a huge losses. So companies use swaps for protecting themselves from uncertainty. Now let's understand the most common swap in the world, which is interest rate swap, and understand this with a real life example. Suppose there are two parties. Suppose two companies. Company A has a fixed interest rate loan, for example, 10-year, 10% every year, and everything was constant. And company B has a floating interest rate loan. It interest rate with market conditions changed with market conditions, maybe 8% today, 11% later, 9% after a few months. So floating rates creates uncertainty. But here is the most important question is, if fixed interest rate is safer, then why would anyone choose floating rates? Because different companies have different expectations. Suppose company A believes interest rate may fall in future. If rates fall, floating interest may become cheaper. So company A wants floating rates to potentially save money. Meanwhile, company B becomes worried that floating rates rise even more. So company B wants stable and predictable payments. Now both companies have opposite needs. That creates a swap opportunity. How the swap happens? Company A says I'll take floating payments and company B says I'll take fixed payments. So both exchange their interest payment structure. That becomes an interest rate swap. Real world example is banks and large corporations regularly use interest rate swaps to manage borrowing cost and reduce uncertainty. In fact, interest rate swaps are among the largest derivative contracts in the world. Now, let's understand another major type, which is currency swap. This is a heavily used by a multinational companies and banks. And currency swaps helps companies to reduce their exchange rate risk. Let's understand this with an amazing example with real world. One of the most famous swaps deals in history happened in 1981 between IBM and World Bank. It is considered one of the first major modern swap deals in the world. IBM's problem is they had borrowed money in Swiss francs and German currency, but later IBM wanted more exposure to US dollar instead. Meanwhile, the World Bank wants Swiss francs and German currency funding because borrowing there was a cheaper, but directly borrowing there was a difficult. So what did they do? They entered into a currency swap arranged by a Salomon brothers. They exchanged currency obligations, interest payments, and financial exposures. So both parties benefited. IBM managed its currency exposure better, and World Bank got a cheaper foreign funding. This deal becomes a major milestone in derivatives history. And my dear friend, this is a perfect example of currency swaps. Lastly, let's understand another important type, which is commodity swap. These are used by companies dealing with oil, gas, metals, agricultures, and raw materials. Simple real life example, let's understand this with, suppose an airline company is worried that fuel prices may rise sharply in future. If oil prices rise, airline expense becomes massive. So the airline enters into a commodity swap with the financial institutions. The airline agrees on a fixed fuel price while the other party takes the risk of market price fluctuations. So even if oil prices rise suddenly, the airline gets stability in fuel cost. And note this down that airlines, energy companies, and manufacturers regularly use commodity swaps to protect profits from sudden raw material price increases. But where do swaps happen? Most swaps do not happen on a regular stock exchanges. They usually happen private between institutions. This market is called the OTC market. OTC means over the counter. This means customized private agreements between two parties. We'll cover this later. What OTC is. Now, who uses swaps? Swaps are mostly used by banks, multinational companies, governments, hedge funds, and financial institutions because these contracts are usually very large and customized. Understood? Thank you.